So we've described pedal 6/4s and passing 6/4s as harmonic embellishments to other chords that surround them. An important thing to recognize about pedal and passing 6/4s is that these chords don't really serve as functional chords within the larger context of the progressions that they appear in. Any function that they might have is strictly localized to the chords that they're embellishing. The cadential 6/4 chord is a bit of a different story. While it's also something of an embellishing chord, the chord that it embellishes and the kind of anticipation it creates in the process gives it a more influential harmonic role compared to the other types of 6/4 chords. The cadential 6/4 gets its name from its use in cadences, particularly its use just before dominant 5 or 5/7 chords. In fact, we consider the cadential 6/4 as helping to serve as part of the dominant function. So let's look at what it is and how we get there. Looking strictly at the spelling, the cadential 6/4 looks exactly like a 1 chord, but in second inversion. It includes the tonic pitch, the 3rd scale degree, and the 5th scale degree, which appears in the bass. What makes the cadential 6/4 different from other 1 chords, however, is that it tends to be preceded immediately by a predominant chord. At first glance, this seems a bit backwards. 1 chords, as we've learned, serve a tonic function, and tonic chords are supposed to come before predominant chords, not after. So this is true, but let's keep looking. The cadential 6/4 chord completes its story by resolving directly into a 5 or a 5/7 chord. It achieves this by having the 1st and 3rd scale degrees, the notes that sound a 6th above the bass and a 4th above the bass, resolve down by step. The bass stays put during this motion. As a result, that cadential 6/4 becomes a 5 chord. Like other 6/4 chords, the cadential 6/4 should feature a doubled chordal 5th, or a doubled bass note, when occurring in 4-part texture. Leaving the cadential 6/4, that upper voice that doubles the bass can either continue to double the bass into the 5 chord, or can step down out of the cadential 6/4, thus creating a 5/7 chord. So the motions that I just described explain the voice leading requirements when exiting the cadential 6/4 chord. The bass remains the same, the 1st and 3rd scale degrees step down to become the 3rd and 5th of the 5 chord respectively, and the bass doubling upper voice either sustains its pitch along with the bass or steps down to form the 7th of a 5/7 chord. But what about the voice leading into a cadential 6/4? As I stated, the cadential 6/4 is immediately preceded by a predominant chord. For smoothest results, we want to use a predominant chord in which the bass features a 4th scale degree, or fa. Eligible chords include a root position 4 chord, make sure you double the root if you use that one, or a 1st inversion 2 chord, whether that's a 2/6 triad, again double the root there, or a 2/6/5 chord with all members present. These predominant chords each allow the bass to enter the cadential 6/4 chord by stepping up into the 5th scale degree. As I stated before, that note in the bass will linger on beyond the cadential 6/4 to become the root of the 5 chord. Any of the predominant options will include the 6th scale degree somewhere in the upper voices. Whichever voice has that pitch in the predominant should step down into the cadential 6/4, joining the bass on the 5th scale degree. Again, from this doubling, the voice will either continue to sustain its pitch to double the root of the 5 chord, or will step down to become the 7th of a 5/7 chord. If the predominant chord includes the 1st scale degree, or do, as would be the case with the 4 chord or the 2/6/5 chord, that pitch should be sustained into the cadential 6/4, from which it will then step down to become the 3rd of the 5 chord. If a root position 4 chord is used as a predominant, whichever note doubled the bass in the 4 will move down by step into the 3rd scale degree as part of the cadential 6/4. From there, as we've seen, it will move down by step again to become the 5th of the 5 chord. If the predominant chord is a 2/6 triad, again, make sure the root is doubled. One of the voices doubling that root will step down out of the 2/6, the other will step up. Between these two voices, we'll have the coverage we'll need on that 1st and 3rd scale degree as part of the cadential 6/4. If the predominant is a 2/6/5, this decision is actually a bit easier for us. Only one of the upper voices will contain the root of the 2/6/5. Move that note up into the 3rd scale degree of the cadential 6/4. Because the 2/6/5 will already have the tonic pitch present elsewhere, that pitch will simply carry over into the cadential 6/4. Now listen again to our examples that incorporate 6/4 chords. Remember, the pitches match the spelling of the 1 chord exactly, but does it really sound like the kind of stable 1 that we're used to hearing? Yeah, something is fundamentally different about the sound of that chord, even though it has all the members of the 1 chord. It sounds very much like it's contributing to the dominant related work of the 5. That brings us to how to label this thing. By rights, we should be fine to label cadential 6/4 chords as 1/6/4s, because again, they do contain the pitches of the 1 chord after all. If we use this labeling, then as with other 6/4 chords we've talked about, we have to make sure we add the clarification underneath the Roman numeral, right in the word cadential. There are other ways of labeling cadential 6/4s. My preferred method is to label them as C/6/4 chords. There's nothing particularly magical about this labeling, but it does help us underline the cadential nature of this chord. By avoiding the use of the Roman numeral 1 altogether, we can highlight that given its harmonic context, the C/6/4 is really a precursor to 5. Accordingly, it should not be mistaken for a tonic chord in any way, despite its spelling. So for our purposes, you may choose whether to label a cadential 6/4 as either a 1/6/4 with the word cadential written underneath, or simply C/6/4. To summarize, cadential 6/4 chords show up, as the name suggests, in cadential patterns, specifically just before 5 or 5/7 chords that serve dominant functions. Even though cadential 6/4s are spelled exactly like 1 chords in second inversion, their sonority following predominant chords make them sound much more like preparatory dominant chords. All voices enter and exit cadential 6/4 chords through common tone or stepwise motion. The cadential 6/4 itself must feature a doubled bass note, as is the case for all 6/4 chords. We can label a cadential 6/4 either as a 1/6/4 with the word cadential written underneath, or for more clarification, simply as C/6/4.